So what is it like? What is what like? Working with autistic kids. You mean children on the autism spectrum. Yeah, since you know they can't speak, so they can't do much. Well, I don't speak Spanish, and that hasn't stopped me from doing anything. Well, aren't their brains slow? Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. These kinds of disorders are associated with impairments in the growth and development of the brain. In more comprehensible terms, these disorders inhibit a child from reaching the milestones their typically developing peers do. There are 3.5 million adults living with autism. Now, some may have a comorbid intellectual disability, but not all do, only 10%. Clinically, autism is a regression or lack of typical development in communication skills, both verbal and nonverbal, repetitive behaviors, such as hand twitches, facial twitches, or rocking. Those on the spectrum may also have restricted interests. But it's important to remember that autism is a spectrum disorder, encompassing an array of unique mannerisms and behaviors at a variety of severities and manifestations. Therefore, one person's autism identity is really incomparable to someone else's. Some are considered high functioning and can make up the 1.5 million adults living with ASD and may not even know. But there are other functioning levels. Those that are more afflicted with the sensory overload, the challenging behaviors, and the communication difficulties that affect their daily living. While a lot about autism does remain a mystery, we do know a few things. For example, children with this disorder are diagnosed typically around 18 months to 3 years by a mental health professional or pediatrician. Also, autism favors males 5 times more than females. The diagnostic rate for autism used to be 6.4% in 2000. Right now, it's 16.7%. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, the widening clinical definition. Autism spectrum disorder is now encompassing more disorders and syndromes. Recently, Rett syndrome and childhood disintegrative disorder have been added to the autism definition. This is because children with these disorders and syndromes have similar behaviors and mannerisms as those on the spectrum. Secondly, as people with autism have offspring, they hold a higher genetic probability to have a child with autism. Third, we know that there's a growing trend to have children later in life, something new to our course of human history. And this is a predictor in having a child with autism. However, there's even newer research that suggests it's actually the age difference between the two parents, not the delay in childbearing, that's the predictor for having a child with autism. Stigma. Stigma is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance or quality. Autism stigma is this idea that because someone has autism spectrum disorder, they're inherently less of a person, should be treated differently, or receive different care. To me, autism stigma is when I'm at the park playing with my kiddo and I hear the moms whisper about how my kiddo shouldn't be playing on an iPad at the park. Little do they know, that's how my kiddo communicates. And she's swiping "park is fun." And I'm eagerly waiting for her to finish so I can give her high fives and a tickle. To me, autism stigma is when I'm recruiting here for my study at Santa Clara University, and I reach out to parents asking them if they're interested in having their child participate. And they tell me no. Their child has autism, and therefore inherently not smart. But for those on the spectrum and their loved ones, autism is the same, yet a unique experience. It's the looks, the whispers, the groans. It starts at a macro level and seeps its way down, haunting the communities until finally it shakes the very bones of the people themselves living with autism. Stigma can be at a variety of levels: societal, communal, familial. Societal stigma. It all started with Andrew Wakefield, who decided to publish an article in the Lancet Journal claiming a correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism. The MMR vaccine is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine given to children at around the same age as an autism spectrum disorder manifestation. Here's the thing, there were some issues with that journal. One, a conflict of interest. Two, it broke ethical codes. Third, and most importantly, the research was manipulated. So his license was stripped and the research was revoked. Yet despite the fact that countless research entities, medical centers, and universities have found no correlation between vaccines, their ingredients, i.e. thimerosal, and autism, people still hold on to this belief. Community stigma. Elle is a beaming 5-year-old who has recently developed some pretty mad BMX skills on his tricycle. He loves all things related to Minecraft and loves talking about Disneyland and how far of a drive things are from his house. He really doesn't like working on he's or she's, or when we have to write stories longer than 3 words. He especially doesn't like when I don't park my car in the same spot so that he can't beep my car horn when we're on a walk. One day, after a uniquely difficult dentist appointment, Dad decided to buy Elle a gift from Target. When in the toy section, Dad turned to Elle and reminded Elle, "Now, Elle, just one toy." Elle stood there deciding between a stegosaurus and a triceratops. He just couldn't decide. Overwhelmed, he started to tantrum. Dad convinced Elle to come with him to the cashier, hoping he could calm him down there. "Now, Elle, just one toy." He began to tantrum more. The cashier looked at Dad. "You need to get your unruly child out of line and handle him." Dad was embarrassed. He didn't want to cause a scene, so he ended up buying Elle both dinosaurs. But he was disappointed in the treatment that he had received. People assumed a situation, and people assumed that his child was ill-behaved and that he was somehow a bad parent. I worked with a child who was going to a summer camp, and it was really early in the morning when the summer camp started, like 8 a.m. early. So I always went to Starbucks in the morning, and so on the 3rd day of having the same barista, the barista finally looked at me and said, "Man, what gets you up so early?" And I told her, "Well, I work as a behavioral therapist for kids on the autism spectrum." And she looked at me and said, "Wow, you're a saint. It takes a special person to do that." Had she just insinuated that people on the autism spectrum were somehow a separate group rather than a part of the population just with a medical diagnosis? And surely you didn't need religious or special powers to get to know them. Now I've told you about Elle, but Elle and A are both twins on the spectrum. A's pretty amazing. She's nonverbal, and I've been working with her for a really long time. She loves music and the outdoors And she has the best sense of style. She has high-top cheetah print shoes and manages to incorporate pink into all of her outfits. One day during session, her brother Elle looked at me and said, "Does my sister not talk because she doesn't have a brain?" I looked at him stunned. I didn't know what to say. "Well, Elle, people talk in lots of different ways. Some people speak in languages we can't understand. Other people use their hands, some people use pictures, some people use an iPad. Your sister uses her device." "Elle, what made you think of this?" "Well, people at school told me that's why she can't do anything." "Elle, your sister can do a puzzle faster than anyone in this family." "You're right, and she's pretty cute." I looked at him for a really long time. But it dawned on me then how early stigma starts and how it alters our view of people in the spectrum's capability. Family stigma. I worked with a family whose grandmother attributed autism spectrum disorder diagnosis to demonic possession. This meant whenever her granddaughter engaged in challenging behaviors, which for her was hair pulling and biting of her arm, she performed sacred rituals on her. She had a lot of sympathy for her granddaughter, but never bothered to educate herself. Kay went to a Chinese school, and his grandparents and parents weren't heavily involved in therapy. They attributed his disorder to years of bad luck and poor decisions. And as a result, he and his brother were treated very differently. So what's the result of this stigma? What happens to the kids? Well, they begin to feel this stigma, and they begin to internalize the difference in treatment compared to siblings and peers, and you can see this. You can see this in their resistance to try new activities, meet new people, go to new places. Instead of learning to embrace and challenge the barriers an autism spectrum disorder may place on someone, they might learn to succumb to the labels the environment has put on them. And this can just begin to degrade their self-worth, and they will begin to not demand any greater of themselves. But it's important to remember that this can also have an effect on your family. If you feel that your community is judging you based on your child's behavior related to an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, you may feel you want to stay in more. Then you isolate yourself. But that just tells a child on the spectrum that they're an oddity, that they should be ashamed. Rather than learning to embrace the unique qualities that disorder brings, secluding them won't help anyone. Lastly, it also creates family dysfunction for the parts of the family that may feel ASD is due to religious or cultural reasons. This can often lead to splits or family disagreements, and that just leaves a child on the spectrum at the center. What can we do? Let's follow the facts. Always listen to what the data, the science, and the experts have to say. If you see a child behaving in public in a way that's not typical or disruptive, don't assume the child's ill-behaved or poorly parented. We don't know what's going on. Rather than feeling sorry for someone with an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, educate yourself. Become an advocate. Remind children of learning differences, what they are, what to say, what not to say. Remind them early and remind them often. If you hear someone say something stigmatizing, speak up. Autism stigma, no matter where it stems from, can be lifelong and debilitating. If you spy autism stigma, educate yourself before you judge, conclude, and act. Then, pass that education on. Autism stigma starts, but ends with us. Finally, I would like to give a big, great, and loving thank you to the children and families that I get to spend my time with. Thank you.